I want to tell you guys about something that took me way too long to understand. You ever date someone who swears they're completely over their ex? Like they look you dead in the eyes and say, he means nothing to me anymore. But somehow, that same guy keeps showing up in conversations. He shows up in stories. He shows up in late-night texts. He shows up in calls you weren't supposed to know about. Yeah, that's what happened to me with Jessica. Jessica is 29. I'm 24. When we first started dating, I honestly thought I had hit the jackpot. She was confident, funny, outgoing. She had her life together way more than I did. At the time, I was just working, saving money, figuring life out. She had a nice apartment, a stable job, a social circle, and honestly, she made me feel like I had leveled up. But there was one thing she mentioned early on, her ex, Charles. Now, to be fair, the first time she mentioned him, it seemed completely normal. We were sitting at a coffee shop about 2 weeks into dating, and she casually said, "Just so you know, my last relationship ended pretty messy. My ex, Charles, was complicated." I remembered nodding like a mature adult. "Yeah, that's fine. Everyone has a past." She immediately said, "Oh, don't worry, I'm completely over him." That was the first time she said it, but it definitely wasn't the last. The weird thing about people who say they're over someone is they tend to talk about them a lot. At first, it was small stuff. We'd be watching a movie and she'd randomly say, "Charles hated this actor." Or we'd go to a restaurant and she'd say, "Charles used to order that every time." Now, I didn't think much of it at the beginning. I mean, she dated the guy for 3 years. Memories happen. But it started happening a lot, like way more than normal. One night we were cooking dinner together, and she was telling me about a trip she took to Chicago. Halfway through the story, she goes, "Oh yeah, Charles and I went there once." Then 10 minutes later, Charles got food poisoning on that trip. Then 5 minutes later, Charles almost missed the flight home. At some point, I just started laughing. She looked at me confused. "What?" I said, "You know you've said Charles's name like 5 times in the last 10 minutes, right?" She rolled her eyes. "Oh my God, don't be insecure. I'm just telling a story." Then she added the line I would hear 100 more times. "He means nothing to me." Okay, fair enough. I dropped it. But then the texts started. Now, I wasn't snooping. I'm not that guy. But sometimes when you're sitting next to someone and their phone lights up, you see things. One night we were on the couch watching Netflix. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it quickly and flipped the screen over. I didn't think anything of it until it buzzed again, and again, and again. I joked, "Dang, who's blowing you up like that?" She hesitated for half a second, then said, "Oh, it's Charles." Now immediately my brain was like, "Wait, what?" But she waved it off. "He's just asking about some stuff we still have to figure out from when we lived together." That made sense, kind of. Breakups sometimes take time to untangle. So I said, "Oh, okay." Then she added, "I barely respond to him anyway. And once again, he means nothing to me." A couple weeks passed. Things were good. We were going out, hanging with friends, staying at each other's places, but Charles kept popping up like some kind of ghost in the relationship. One night, Jessica and I were at a bar with some of her friends. Someone asked her why her last relationship ended, and she immediately launched into this detailed explanation about Charles. Apparently, Charles had commitment issues. Apparently, Charles wasn't emotionally available. Apparently, Charles didn't know what he had until it was gone. Now, again, I didn't interrupt, but she talked about this guy for like 15 minutes straight. At one point, her friend jokingly said, "Jess, you sure you're over him?" Jessica laughed. "Oh my God, yes, I'm so over him." Then she pointed at me. "Matthew's way better anyway." Everyone laughed, but I noticed something. The way she talked about Charles, there was still emotion there. Not love, maybe, but definitely something. Then came the late-night call. This was the moment everything started feeling different. It was about 1:30 in the morning. Jessica was staying over at my place. We had fallen asleep watching TV. Her phone started vibrating on the nightstand. At first, she ignored it, but then it kept buzzing. Finally, she grabbed it and looked at the screen. I saw the name, Charles. She quietly got out of bed and walked into the kitchen. Now, again, I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but my apartment isn't that big, and when someone's whispering at 1:30 in the morning, you notice. I couldn't hear the whole conversation, but I caught a few things. Why are you calling me right now? No, I'm not coming over. That's not my problem anymore. Charles, stop. Then there was a long pause, and then she said something that made my stomach drop. I told you I moved on. Moved on, present tense conversation, at 1:30 in the morning, with her ex? That's when my brain started putting pieces together. When she came back into the bedroom, I pretended to still be half asleep. She slid into bed. I asked casually, "Everything okay?" She sighed. "Yeah, just Charles being dramatic." I asked, "What did he want?" She rolled her eyes. "He just needed someone to talk to." Then she said the line again, "I swear he means nothing to me." But this time, it didn't sound convincing. Over the next month, Charles became this weird, invisible third person in our relationship. He texted her occasionally, he called sometimes. She always had an explanation. He's going through a rough time. He doesn't really have anyone else. He's trying to apologize for how he treated me. And every single time I questioned it, Jessica would say, "Matthew, you're overthinking this. He means nothing to me." But here's the thing I started realizing. When someone truly means nothing to you, you don't talk to them. You don't answer their calls. You don't entertain their late-night emotional breakdowns. You just move on. The breaking point came one Saturday afternoon. Jessica and I were hanging out at her apartment. She went to take a shower. Her phone was on the kitchen counter. It buzzed once, twice, 3 times. Again, I wasn't trying to look, but the notifications were literally lighting up the screen, and the name was impossible to miss. Charles. The messages kept popping up. "Can we talk? I miss you. Please just answer." Then the last one. "I know you're with him, but I still love you." That one hit different. Now again, I didn't go digging through her phone, but those messages were sitting right there, and suddenly, everything started making sense. The stories, the calls, the constant mention of him. This wasn't someone who meant nothing. This was unfinished business. When Jessica came out of the shower, I asked her directly, "Are you still talking to Charles?" She looked confused. "What do you mean?" I said, "Your phone lit up with like 5 messages from him." She immediately looked uncomfortable. "Oh, yeah, he's just being emotional again." I asked the question I had been avoiding for months. "Does he still think you're getting back together?" She paused. That pause told me everything. Finally, she said, "No, I told him we're done." Then she added, "He just has trouble letting go." I nodded slowly. Then I asked the real question. "Jessica, why are you still letting him hold on?" Silence. For the first time since we started dating, she didn't have an immediate answer. She sat down at the table and stared at her phone. Then she said something honest. "I don't know." That was the moment everything shifted, because suddenly the confident "I'm over him" story disappeared, and a more complicated reality showed up. She admitted something. Charles and I were together a long time. Part of me still feels responsible for him, like if I completely cut him off, something bad might happen. I get that. Breakups can be messy, but there's a difference between compassion and keeping someone emotionally attached. So I asked her, "Do you still have feelings for him?" She immediately said, "No." Then she hesitated and added, "Not like that." "Not like that" told me more than she probably intended. At that moment, I realized something important. Jessica wasn't cheating, but she also wasn't fully available. Emotionally, part of her was still stuck in that old relationship. And Charles knew it. That's why he kept texting. That's why he kept calling, because deep down, he knew the door wasn't completely closed. And honestly, Jessica knew it too. I told her something that day that changed our relationship. I said, "Jessica, I'm not competing with your past. I'm not going to sit here while another guy still thinks he has access to you." She looked shocked. "I told you he means nothing to me." And I finally said the thing that had been building for months. If he really meant nothing, he wouldn't still be part of your life. Silence. She didn't argue, because she knew I was right. People who are truly over someone don't keep emotional lifelines open. They don't answer late-night calls. They don't entertain "I miss you" texts. They don't let their ex orbit around their life like a satellite. They move forward, completely. Jessica eventually did block Charles, but it didn't happen overnight. It took weeks of uncomfortable conversations, boundaries, and honesty about what she was still holding on to, about what she needed to let go of, and about what our relationship could actually become once the ghost of Charles stopped showing up. But that experience taught me something I wish I had understood earlier. When someone constantly brings up their ex, it's usually not random. It's usually not meaningless. It's usually because that person still occupies space in their mind, sometimes emotionally, sometimes unresolved, sometimes both. And no relationship can fully grow while someone else is still living rent-free in the background. So if someone tells you, "He means nothing to me," but he keeps showing up in conversations, texts, late-night calls, or emotional stories, pay attention, because people's actions always reveal more than their words, and sometimes the person they say they're over is still the person they haven't actually let go of.